Welcome to the Tech 1-2 podcast. I'm your host, John Kampas, founder and CEO of EMPIST. Today, I have the pleasure of having one of our vCIOs, Ken Hughes, with me today in the studio. Today, we're going to discuss cloud and how your business could benefit from it. So thank you for being in the studio today, Ken.
John, I'm glad to be here. It's going to be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. So let's just start off. What is the cloud?
Cloud means a lot of things, but most basically, it's the delivery of IT capabilities across the internet. So there can be a range of them. Almost everybody will be familiar with software as a service. So whether it's Salesforce, or I think about whether it's our law firm customers or our membership organizations or our manufacturers, they all have at least one key application on which they run their business. And by and large, these days, they're choosing to consume those services and get the benefits by using applications out of the cloud. So that's one example of cloud.
Okay, so wait a second. You're telling me that the cloud isn't in the sky?
Today it is, but yes, no. In fact, it's in a lot of places. It can be in hyperscale cloud providers like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. It can be in cloud providers like EMPIST.
Okay, well, fantastic. So it sounds like there's a ton of use cases for the cloud and things that we've been doing for our clients. We've seen tremendous benefits from it. Mm-hmm. You mentioned hyperscale clouds. What exactly is that?
Well, these are those three vendors that I mentioned, and I know there's a major provider in China that also has great share in Asia, but When cloud, as we discuss it today and as I'm referencing, got started, there were very limited use cases. One of the early ones was, in fact, for still on-prem applications, but doing the dev server in cloud. There was a business case for running that server and doing your dev work in the cloud. So across time and across the many years, there have become more and more use cases where the financial benefit and the service delivery makes sense to run it out of the cloud.
So we hear public cloud providers, we hear hyperscale, we hear private clouds. There's different use cases. We've seen different use cases for customers. I mean, some of the factors, compliance requirements, where is the data being stored, especially if you're dealing with a customer or an organization in Europe. You want to make sure that you have protections there, GDPR and various compliance. But we've seen all these use cases. What are we seeing the most of right now just within the customer base? Are they going public cloud? Are they going private cloud? What have you seen?
Well, we do see some of it for organizations that have an existing I'll say commitment and orientation toward Azure. We will see on-prem workload continue to move to them. For customers that are not committed to other platforms, commonly they come to EMPIST because we are their service provider. Mm-hmm. And so when they face a server refresh cycle, that is a good time to bring your workload to the cloud. There's economic benefits to it.
Like what? What are some of the economic benefits?
Well, one of the things that comes most to mind is that time value of money. The money that you put out is spaced out each month rather than a large sum of money buying a bunch of servers and a bunch of expensive Microsoft licenses and such. So, you
more from a CapEx to an OpEx.
Definitely moves it. For those that have a preference for CapEx versus OpEx, then you get to consume your IT and spend on it in an OpEx way.
So, but in an OpEx way, a traditional on-premise equipment, one of the things that we've seen in just across all industries is oftentimes if you're installing new on-premise equipment, you're not capturing or gaining all the benefits of all those resources at the time of purchase, but you're usually purchasing and procuring a device that may be more than what you need because you're planning for a few years ahead before you have to refresh it again. In the cloud, with it being more elastic, with it going up or down based on your resources and utilization, that definitely frees up cash for businesses to do more.
Yeah, well said. if you buy a server with the or a set of servers with an expectation of using them for 5 years, it has to be sized to 5 years, and so you'll be putting a lot of money out the door, and you won't use it until maybe year 4 of the server. So yes, it is a better use of your money to pay for it when you need it, and to match your cash outlay from the time frame during which you're getting the benefit.
Okay. So what do you think about businesses that think that their data is more secure, in their server room in the closet, where they can just feel like they can touch and feel their data, and they believe that it's more secure being in an office versus a cloud provider? We know that there's risks associated with any type of infrastructure that you may have configured, but what have you seen in the industry within clients? I mean, should security really be a concern, less of a concern on premise versus in the cloud?
Categorically, no. There are some enterprises that are very mature in their use of security, and if they are, they probably have a reason for that. I'm going to guess there's a compliance reason. A lot of the time, compliance actually drives security, and compliance is not security, but by becoming compliant, you move in the direction of de-risking and having security.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody had invested in all this infrastructure and all this security and all this technology locally, and they had the on-premise, I mean, what would you? I know this would be a very difficult assessment to be able to even throw out a number, but even just from a ratio perspective, for somebody to build the same security that is currently present in the cloud on-premise, would you say it's, I mean, is it 6 figures? Is it 5 figures? What is it? 7 figures for them to build that kind of security?
Sure. Well, because cloud providers like us and others out there host for so many different customers, the needed investments for security get amortized or spread across a larger customer base. So your cloud providers are able to spend more money and to provide a greater depth of security because those costs get spread across more enterprises.
Okay. So when we talk about the cloud, you mentioned their services, and we know 365, and companies it's actually one of the fastest growing technologies that is out there, with a rapid adoption of cloud technologies. Microsoft 365 is a cloud, correct?
Sure. Yeah. It's a suite of productivity and other services from Microsoft.
Okay.
Cloud based.
And then we hear offloading resources or workloads. So we look at files, we look at files, we look at applications, we look at various software that can go in the cloud. But when we look at additional cloud resources, you mentioned as far as moving some workloads from on-premise to the cloud, are you suggesting that it's more of an Office 365 type, or is it more of an Azure? What type of cloud deployment are you referring to?
I would say for one thing that happens when we migrate to the cloud is file usage is not done on file servers on-prem anymore. And one of the nice things about that is that you don't need to remote into the office to get your files. You can get them on your phone. You can get them as long as you can get to a web browser. You can get to them. So I would say that file access, universal access to files so that you can be more productive or be productive anywhere is a driver. And then again, when you're faced with a server refresh, the math shows up pretty quickly that the benefit is toward just moving that into the cloud.
Man, I love what you said, the universal file access, like anywhere, anytime access of files and being able to access all of your information on the go is a tremendous benefit to organizations. Mm-hmm. I was actually speaking with a client, actually a prospect, a few days ago, and they were very frustrated by the way that they, by what was required for them to access files. And one of the items that was brought up is, we're tired of opening up files, and someone else tries to open them, and they're read-only. We can't collaborate with them.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, does this happen anymore in the cloud?
Well, that probably would come out of Google Docs or the Microsoft 365 Outlook. But yeah, collaboration in the cloud is a big benefit. What I would say is for organizations that are not doing that kind of collaboration in the cloud yet, they're probably not doing it because they don't know what they're missing. I'm finding that once users know what can be done, you don't need to give them the use cases. They will find it out for themselves. They will say, oh my gosh, that's there. They have every incentive to use those capabilities because it's in their benefit. So just get them to the water, and they will find a use for the cloud capabilities.
Okay. So it's probably a lack of understanding. They don't know what they don't
Yes.
know. And you're discussing public cloud providers or any cloud. So let's go back to cloud. So we talk about public, we talk about private, we talk about hybrid, we talk about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, any AAS, as far as any technology out there. But what would be a benefit of an organization of having a hybrid cloud where they still have some workloads on premise and others in the cloud?
Well, it's just a matter of what the use cases are. So every workload should be evaluated, and where can it be most economically or appropriately served. So, but if I'm really thinking about it, some things like I could imagine an engineering heavy organization wanting to keep the data local. Engineering documents are very large, and moving them over the internet all the time would, in my mind, could quite likely favor keeping that local rather than doing that across the cloud. Any compliance reasons to keep data locally, like you say GDPR or something else regulatory, could argue for keeping that on. And then other things will simply be more appropriately consumed and delivered out of the cloud.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. Having your files in the cloud, if you are an engineering firm, graphic design, someone who has very large files that they're working with, you're essentially copying those files back down. So that could impact productivity. And, assessing what currently exists is extremely important. The assessment piece of it, you can't just say, oh, every company, every client is a candidate for the cloud. They may be, but it might not be the right solution for them. So how important is it to assess what an organization is using before saying, I'm going to put everything into the cloud?
One of the best things about being a vCIO is that you always get to start with the business requirements. So we look at what kind of outcome are we trying to do, and then from there, then we assess. We cannot carte blanche just say that everything should be in the cloud. So it really starts with where can this workload be? Again, I'm just going to say what's the business case? What can you do, economically? What provides the access that your users need? What lines up with a customer's budgetary approach?
So once let's say a company's outcome is that they want to go to a distributed workforce, would you say public or private or on premise?
Yeah,
You can consider a private.
yeah.
You can consider a private being on premise too. But again, the cloud is just somebody else's computer.
Pretty
It's
much.
somebody else's server. There's a lot of technology and applications and platforms behind that. So just a very simplified, it's somebody else's system. But they're going to be a distributed workforce. They're closing their office down. They have on-premise equipment currently. What would you recommend to somebody based on that?
We've seen a lot of that, during the COVID, through the COVID era, now post-COVID, and as people's leases come up for buildings and they have a smaller percentage of people coming into the office, they're downsizing. And so that is a common time for us to take infrastructure to the cloud. I think it is supportive of a distributed workforce. The focus there is what do end users need to be productive, and some of it is collaboration tools, some of it is access to files, some of it is enhanced security capabilities. I've personally become really impressed with a lot of the bottomless security capabilities that Microsoft is adding to theirs. They're not the best in everything, but for a 365 subscription, you can cover a lot. You can really reduce your attack surface. There's just a breadth of security capabilities there.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've seen tremendous benefits from that, and seen our customers have had a great return on investment there. But on premise, you also have a phone system. You have networking equipment. You might have printers. How would that work? If I have a phone system, I have an old PBX at the office, and we're closing our office down, or again, we're expanding, we're scaling, we're adding more locations. What do I do with that phone system?
Well, there's two things. One, just speaking for EMPIST, we do hosted VoIP, so we can offer that. So going to an internet-based solution, all of these come with an app that'll run on the phone. So that's certainly one approach. And then a lot of customers will also look at Teams from Microsoft to do that. Whether they go and just use the local PC as the phone device, or whether they go with some sort of Teams-enabled device. But yeah, for somebody that's moving an office and still is running on a POTS system, then it would be time to look at VoIP.
POTS, plain old telephone system?
That's the one.
Okay. All right, got it. Analog's not good? That's good.
It's the analog providers like it.
Okay, it's good for some purposes.
Yeah.
But that's a dinosaur. That's a dinosaur piece of it. So we look at support. So I'm a business in the cloud. Perhaps I work with some technology provider, some solutions provider, and I get everything into the cloud. And now I'm in the cloud. What does support look like? What would support look like with these cloud providers? Are you working with your solutions provider that implemented this for you? Are you working directly with the third party who's hosting all my data? What does support look like?
Oh, well, I try never to say it depends. It depends on what the nature of that cloud service is that you're consuming. If you're consuming infrastructure as a service, then your provider of that infrastructure as a service will have a support organization, and they have service obligations, service level objectives that they have for providing uptime, security, recoverability, etc. If it is for an application, then that you just wind up having a direct relationship with the provider of that software as a service.
So because we move everything into the cloud, is all my data protected?
That is dependent on the security measures that your cloud provider takes. They do disclaim, they do not take on complete liability. It's quite clearly described in very long contracts, and they do disclaim a lot of liability for that. So there are ways and reasons to do security on top of whatever the actual application provider is doing.
So you're telling me that in the end user license agreement, they have it somewhat buried in there that they're not responsible for the data?
By and large, yes.
Okay. That's you would assume.
Sorry to break the news to you.
Yeah, it's something that needs to be reviewed, and you need to have the safeguards in place, because should something happen to a cloud provider, whether it's private or public, whatever type of cloud it is, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, it always is good. It is best practice to also back up your data. So
if we're talking about backing up mail systems, in particular 365, but Microsoft describes it as a shared responsibility. Microsoft is certainly going to provide an immensely available platform, but their backup and recovery is largely limited to versions of data rather than saying, hey, can you get so-and-so's calendar from 60 days ago? They left the company, but I need to see who they worked with. So, and another thing to think about in backing up your cloud-based collaboration software, email and such, is the fact that the biggest reason to do a recovery is accidental deletion. There can be malicious deletion, but the number one reason that we get asked to restore information out of mail and calendar systems is in fact accidental deletion, which is not noticed until after Microsoft or Google has stopped retaining that data.
Which is usually about 30 days.
30 days.
Yeah, which is about 30 days. So if you find out that someone deleted something off of SharePoint, OneDrive, or the email after 30 days and you don't have a third-party backup, what happens? It's gone?
It's gone.
Okay.
It's gone, yeah.
All right, well.
By design.
Yeah, by design, okay. So being in the cloud, and we mentioned moving workloads, moving applications, what happens about all the upgrades that would normally be someone's responsibility on an on-premise or perhaps even a private cloud?
Sure. So that is the responsibility and the responsibility of the cloud provider. So in the past, where no matter what your business was, again, you had to pay attention to IT. When you rely on a cloud provider, that's their job, which allows you to do your job.
So with public cloud or public, let's just say the cloud provider performing all these updates, what happens if an update breaks something? What would happen to my business? There's a patch that needs to be installed, similar to when we install patches on premise. Patch gets installed in the cloud. What happens to the customers? They're impacted by that?
They certainly could be, but the cloud provider has every incentive and every obligation then to fix that. Even the largest of cloud providers will have outages or minor service disruptions or regions that are having slow performance, and so they have the scale to, and again, the benefit, rather than paying attention to just one enterprise, paying attention to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of enterprises. So they're well positioned and designed to quickly recover from such things.
So let's say I'm a business owner. I have all my data locally. I'm concerned about moving things into the cloud because what if my internet goes down? My internet's not stable. So I may feel that I can still operate. I can still be productive locally because the internet went down and I'm not dependent on the internet. Would you say that the benefits would outweigh the negatives of the pros versus cons of having something on premise and only being on premise because I'm afraid of the internet being down versus the pros of being in a cloud that can improve collaboration, it can improve operations, it can improve productivity? What would you say? Would the pros outweigh the cons?
I'm going to go with the assumption, first of all, is that the customer made an affirmative decision that the proper place for this is in the cloud. The solution to the concern about the internet going down is to have a backup internet line. And that was cost prohibitive not too long ago. But at this point, there's no reason not to have fiber for your primary and to have cable at least to allow yourself to do some minimal services on-prem. I believe that that's the way to address the concern about dependence on the internet.
Okay. So the cloud is accessible from everywhere. And there's nation states, there's a lot of attacks that are happening on public cloud providers. How concerned should a business be about hosting and storing their information in a public cloud provider when it's accessible from everywhere? Are there any safeguards or mitigations that can be done in order to mitigate a risk of someone accessing our data?
Well, speaking for EMPIST, we go to great lengths and put a lot of money into protecting the data, and we have these obligations in our agreements with customers. I'm still going to argue that any cloud provider is better positioned to harden their infrastructure and to recover from some sort of adverse happening because they have the scale and the focus on that compared to doing it yourself. It's just ever changing. I really want to emphasize there's no enterprise. If there's one thing I've learned in my year and a half with EMPIST, there's no enterprise that is too small to attract the attention of the bad guys. $25,000 is a good day. Might not sound like a lot, but to these guys, it's a good day's work. So there's no enterprise that is not interesting. You're not too small to be of interest to somebody. It's economical. It's economical still to attack basically everybody.
But wouldn't they be more incentivized to go after the 800-pound gorilla versus the small business?
Yeah. You're talking about the large enterprise, meaning all these customers out here. Perhaps, but you take smaller enterprises may not be investing as much in their protection. Public sector schools in particular.
So it's low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit for...
Yeah, I mean, these wind up being, on average, softer targets. And so those would be good enterprises to say, this is really hard to keep up. Let me just make this somebody else's responsibility.
Okay. So as part of cyber liability policy, an organization also needs to protect their data. They need to make sure it's available as well. So you talk about disaster recovery and business continuity. Utilizing a cloud provider, are there benefits to being with a cloud provider for disaster recovery and business continuity versus just doing it internally?
It depends how robust you want to be. I think that business continuity and disaster recovery is a higher bar to clear. There's set expectations on what will be recovered, in what order. There's playbooks, that type of thing. To me, that's a higher order of expectation, demand, and cost compared to just recovering your files or maybe standing up your VMs again. Just everything benefits. There's a reason why millions of times the decision has been affirmatively made to move that workload to a cloud provider, and whether it's economics, security, recoverability. There's not too many use cases. Well, there's an awful lot of use cases that argue for it, but there's certainly reasons to keep it on-prem too.
Fantastic. Well, Ken, I really appreciate you being in the studio today. Do you have any closing remarks for our audience?
Thank you for joining.
Fantastic. Well, what's really important when you're selecting a cloud, there's many different options. It's truly doing that assessment and making sure that you align the cloud with whatever business outcomes that you have. It isn't just signing up, going to a web page, signing up for a cloud provider, storing your data there, because it may not be fulfilling all the needs that you have for your business, or perhaps it is today, but not in the future. So we really appreciate you being with us today on our Tech 1-2 podcast. Please stay tuned for our next one. Thank you.